Chapter 5 Withdrawal Symptoms. The belfry didn't smell like a cave. It smelled like wet concrete, forgotten earth, and the specific, metallic scent of soldering iron smoke. Bruce sat at a workbench scavenged from the facility's old maintenance bay. The only light came from a single, articulated halogen lamp bent low over the table, casting hard, shivering shadows against the walls. Above, 60 feet of rock and soil dampened the sound of arroyo, but the vibrations still bled through. The rhythmic thrum of heavy freight haulers, the tectonic groan of a city that was too heavy for its foundation. On the table lay the heart of the Beyond suit. It was a mess of disassembled components, mimetic polyalloy fibers, carbon nanotube weave, and the delicate crystalline lattice of the Lazarus delivery system. Next to it sat the payout from Wakako, a coil of palladium wire and a block of raw tungsten. Bruce's hands moved with a precision that defied the tremors starting to manifest in his left eyelid. He wasn't just repairing, he was performing surgery. Diagnostic, Bruce murmured. His voice was rough, scraping against the silence. Diagnostic running, the suit responded. The voice was smooth, warm, and painfully familiar. It was Victor Stone's voice, recorded and synthesized a lifetime ago to serve as the suit's interface. Kinetic dampeners at 42% efficiency, thermal regulation compromised, rerouting power to compensate for missing plating. Isolate the chest unit, Bruce ordered, feeding a strand of palladium wire into the suit's microport. The conductive pathways are fried. I need to bypass the secondary relay. That will reduce surge protection, Victor's voice countered. It wasn't a true AI. Victor had died before he could finish the coding, but it was an advanced heuristic learning model. It simulated Victor's caution. If you take a direct hit from Militech hardware, the feedback loop could stop your heart. If I take a direct hit, the heart is the least of my problems, Bruce muttered. He touched the soldering iron to the connection. A spark hissed, white hot. Just do it, Vic. Acknowledged. Bypassing safety protocols. Bruce worked. He didn't rest. He hadn't rested since the job at the depot. The adrenaline had faded hours ago, leaving behind a hollow, aching exhaustion that settled deep in his marrow. But he couldn't stop. To stop was to think, and to think was to remember. So he studied. On a trio of salvaged monitors propped up against a crate, data streams cascaded like digital waterfalls. Bruce wasn't just fixing his armor. He was updating his own operating system. He wasn't reacting to Night City anymore. He was dissecting it. He read the patent filings for the Kang Tao smart weapon tracking systems, noting how the locking algorithm prioritized heat signatures over visual confirmation. Flaw. Supercoolants can confuse the lock. He parsed the encrypted BBS chatter of local edge runners. He learned that the Sandevistan reflex boosters weren't magic. They were aggressive overclocks of the nervous system that burned out the user's synapses within 5 years. Weakness. The cooldown period. Between activations, the user is sluggish, chemically hungover. He listened to a leaked earnings call from Petrochem, where an executive casually mentioned acceptable mortality rates in the Badlands extraction zones to explain a 0.4% dip in quarterly profits. Data analysis complete, Victor said. This city's infrastructure is inefficient. Redundancy is minimal. Everything is built to fail and be replaced. Planned obsolescence, Bruce corrected, not looking up from the wire he was braiding. It's not inefficient, Vic. It's profitable. They don't build things to last because durability kills the subscription model. Illogical. Sustainability ensures long-term survival. Survival isn't the goal here, Bruce said, his tone dark. Consumption is. He finished the weld. He set the tool down and rubbed his face with calloused, oil-stained hands. He looked at the monitors again. He brought up the schematics of the prototype he had stolen, the servo control unit. He had held it for less than 20 minutes, but his mind, trained by the greatest detectives and scientists of a dead multiverse, had memorized its architecture. It wasn't a weapon. It was a nervous system. The 6th Street gang thought it was just a high-end stabilizer for heavy turrets. They were thinking too small. The schematic showed a predictive algorithm that measured mechanical stress before it happened, redistributing power to reinforce structural weak points in microseconds. Bruce looked at the Beyond suit. It was a marvel of Wayne tech and apocalyptian engineering, but it was old. It was reactive. It waited for impact, then hardened. That lag, milliseconds of delay, cost energy. It cost Lazarus. Vic, Bruce said, pulling the schematic up on the main screen. Overlay this architecture onto the suit's kinetic weave. Processing. Overlay complete. Theoretical integration would reduce power consumption by 30%. Kinetic absorption would increase by 50%. Not as robust as the original modifications, but it stops the suit from fighting itself, Bruce said, finishing the thought. It anticipates the hit. Correct. However, we do not possess the unit. You gave it to Wakako. Bruce leaned back in the creaking chair. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. It wasn't a happy smile. I gave her the box, Vic. I didn't give her the ownership. He tapped a key. A new window opened on the center monitor. A map of Night City. A single, pulsing red dot was moving slowly through the industrial sector of North Oak. He had planted a subdermal tracker inside the unit's casing before the handoff. A microscopic isotope marker, undetectable by standard scanners unless you knew the specific decay frequency to look for. He watched the dot move. Wakako's courier took it to a drop point in Japantown, Bruce narrated, watching the history log. Handed off to a private security team. Unmarked vehicles. They drove it to a warehouse in North Oak. Destination analysis. Shell Company. Nightcore Logistics. Nightcore, Bruce mused. Quiet. Mysterious. They handle the city's infrastructure. The tunnel boring. The satellites. The mind control rumors. The dot stopped moving. It had reached a secure facility. The stranger did the job, Bruce said quietly. He built the reputation. He got the palladium. But Batman is following the money. Detective protocol active. You suspect a conspiracy? I suspect everything, Vic. Wakako thinks she's just fencing stolen tech. But look at the buyer. Nightcore doesn't buy 6th Street scrap. They're testing something. Deniability. If the unit fails, or if it's traced, it leads back to a street gang, not a megacore. It was the same pattern he had seen in Gotham, magnified 1,000 times. The shell games, the layers of insulation between the hand that held the gun and the hand that signed the check. Suddenly, the suit's console flashed amber. A warning chime, dissonant and sharp, cut through the bunker. Alert. Lazarus levels critical. Reserves at 12%. Scheduled dose required immediately. Bruce froze. The tremors in his hand stopped, replaced by a rigid, locked tension. Administering dose in T-minus 10 seconds, Victor announced. Prepare for injection. Override, Bruce snapped. Negative. Protocols dictate mandatory maintenance. Your biology is dependent on the compound. Without it, cellular degradation will accelerate. Override, damn it! Bruce slammed his fist onto the table. The metal rang. Cancel the injection. Silence. The amber light pulsed. Order accepted via voice authorection. Bruce Wayne. Warning. Withdrawal symptoms predicted. Pain levels will increase. Cognitive function may be impaired. Bruce exhaled. A long, shuddering breath. He slumped forward, resting his forehead against his knuckles. He needed it. His body screamed for it. The Lazarus compound was the only reason he was still walking. It knit his bones, oxygenated his blood, and kept the decades of scar tissue from tearing open. But it was poison. During the Flash Wars, he had used it to fight gods. He had injected it to stay awake for weeks, to heal broken backs in hours, to match the speed of speedsters. But with every dose, the rage grew. The cold, calculating paranoia that was Batman's greatest weapon had sharpened into something jagged. He had become cruel. He had stopped caring about the line between justice and punishment. He looked at his hands. They were shaking again. I won't be a junkie, he whispered. Not here. Not now. Bruce. Victor's voice softened, the algorithm shifting to counselor mode. You are in pain. Pain is data, Bruce recited, the mantra tasting like ash. The withdrawal hit him then. A wave of nausea rolled through his gut. The edges of his vision blurred, fracturing into geometric patterns. And with the fracture came the memories. They didn't come as thoughts. They came as sensory hallucinations overlaid on the gray concrete of the bunker, the smell of burning ozone. He saw Diana, Wonder Woman. She wasn't glowing. She was gray, covered in dust, her shield shattered. She was fighting a swarm of paradox demons. She didn't fall dramatically. She just slowed down. Her heart gave out before her will did. She swung her sword and simply collapsed, too exhausted to breathe. The sound of a ring cracking. Hal, the Green Lantern. The universe had been re-engineered to dampen the emotional spectrum. Willpower had no purchase. The constructs flickered, green light turning to smoke. Hal looked at his hand, confused, as the darkness simply ate him. No scream, just silence. The heat of the red sun. Clark. Bruce squeezed his eyes shut, but the image was burned into his retina. Superman, bleeding. The kryptonite radiation from the war world had altered his cells. He was rotting from the inside. He had looked at Bruce, his eyes filled not with heat vision, but with fear. Bruce, Clark had whispered, I don't know who I am anymore. Bruce had held the piece of gold kryptonite, the mercy kill, the responsibility. Snap. Bruce jerked his head up, gasping for air. He was back in the bunker. He had gripped the edge of the workbench so hard the metal had warped under his fingers. Victor, Bruce rasped. I am here, Bruce. Show me the extraction. Victor Stone ceased to exist on Earth Prime date 2029. I am a system interface modeled on his engram. I know, Bruce shouted. The anger spiked, hot and chemical. I know you're not him. He died. The timeline unraveled him. I watched his cybernetics fall onto the floor because the man inside them was erased from history. He stood up, kicking the chair back. He paced the small perimeter of the lab, his breathing ragged. The ghost of Victor Stone, the machine, stayed silent. It couldn't comfort him. It could only process the outburst. Bruce leaned against the cold wall, pressing his cheek against the concrete. The chill helped ground him. I can't do this, he whispered. I can't do this on 12%. He looked at the suit. It was ugly, patched with mismatched metals. The chest plate was scarred. The cowl was sitting on the table, staring at him with empty white eyes. He looked at the monitor. The red dot on the map was stationary. Night Corps. If he waited for the suit to be perfect, he would fail. If he waited for his body to heal, he would die of old age. Night City didn't wait. It moved. Vic, Bruce said, his voice steadying. The tremors remained, but his mind locked them away in a box labeled irrelevant. How much charge does the suit have? Power cells at 68%. Lazarus reserves critical. Armor integrity at 55%. Enough, Bruce said. He walked back to the table. He picked up the cowl. It felt heavy, heavier than it ever had. We're going out. Objective? The prototype, Bruce said, pulling the undersuit over his shoulders. The material tightened, compressing his injuries, holding his broken rib in place like a corset of steel. I need that nervous system. I need to stabilize the suit so I can wean off the Lazarus. Strategic assessment. Assaulting a Night Corps facility in your current state has a 74% probability of severe injury. Bruce slid the gauntlets on. He checked the grapple mechanism. It clicked, a sound like a gun being cocked. They're expecting a thief, Bruce said. They're expecting an edge runner with a gun and a death wish. He picked up the cowl. He looked into the white lenses. They aren't expecting me. He pulled the mask on. The HUD flared to life. The amber warnings for his health were pushed to the periphery. The world turned into wireframes, thermal gradients, and tactical opportunities. The pain was still there, throbbing in time with his heartbeat, but it was distant now, behind the glass. Bruce Wayne vanished. Batman turned to the main breaker. Kill the lights, Vic. Initiating stealth protocols. The halogen lamp died. The monitors went black. In the absolute darkness of the bunker, the only light came from the faint, predatory glow of the white lenses. Batman moved toward the exit. He wasn't going to save the city. He was going to perform a market correction. Chapter 6. Demons Don't Hide. The rain in North Oak didn't taste like the acid wash of the combat zones. It was filtered, scrubbed by the atmospheric processors of the billionaire class, falling cold and clean on the manicured lawns of the Nightcorp logistics facility. Bruce Wayne stood on the parapet of the adjacent building, the rain sluicing off the matte black plates of the Beyond suit. It wasn't the pristine armor of the Justice League era. It was a scarred, patchwork beast. The chest plate was crisscrossed with tungsten welds that caught the light like jagged scars. The palladium wiring he had braided into the joints hummed with a faint, discordant pitch, a vibration he felt in his teeth. System status, suboptimal, Victor's voice intoned, devoid of judgment, only data. Right knee servo has a 0.4-second latency. Kinetic absorption matrix is unstable above 4,000 newtons. If you hit them too hard, the feedback will fracture your ulna. Then I won't hit them hard, Bruce said, his voice a growl through the synthesizer. I'll hit them precisely. He looked at the tactical overlay. The facility was a fortress of glass and steel, masquerading as a benign corporate office. But the heat signatures told the truth. There were 16 bodies inside the perimeter, high-density thermal outputs, cybernetics running hot, military-grade spinal columns, subdermal plating. These weren't rent-a-cops. They were elite corporate security, likely Arasaka-trained assets leased to Nightcorp to guard the prototype. They didn't fear death. They had redundancy clauses and backup bios. They feared obsolescence. Vic, Bruce said, drop the stealth field. Confirm? Disengaging optical camouflage will alert sensors. Do it. The shimmering distortion around him vanished. He was a solid block of darkness against the gray sky. He wasn't here to ghost them. He was here to traumatize them. The lobby, 2:15. Hours. The reception area was a cathedral of minimalism. White marble floors, abstract hollow art, and silence. 2 guards stood by the elevator bank. Their eyes were glowing red, scanning the feeds from the external cameras. They wore heavy tactical vests over tailored suits. The lights flickered. Not a power outage, a pulse. A deliberate, rhythmic strobing. On, off, on, off. Grid fluctuation? The left guard asked, hand moving to his ear. Control, report. Control? The elevator dinged. Both guards leveled their smart rifles at the doors. The weapons hummed, linking to their SmartLink palms for perfect targeting. The doors slid open. Empty. Clear, the right guard muttered, stepping forward. He didn't see the shadow detach itself from the ceiling of the elevator car. Batman dropped. He didn't land softly. He landed with the heavy, industrial thud of a pile driver. The marble floor cracked under his boots. The guard on the right spun, his reflex booster kicking in, a Kerenzikov implant dilating his perception of time. To him, the world slowed down. He saw the black armor, the white eyes, the jagged fins on the gauntlets. He raised his rifle. But Bruce had fought speedsters. He knew the geometry of superspeed. Bruce didn't move away from the gun. He moved into the guard's center of gravity. He caught the barrel of the rifle with his left hand and the guard's wrist with his right. He didn't punch the man. He twisted. He applied torque directly against the joint of the cybernetic arm, perpendicular to the axis of the hydraulic piston. Crack. It wasn't the sound of bone breaking. It was the sound of titanium tearing out of a socket. The guard screamed, a sound of pure mechanical violation. The SmartLink connection severed. The arm went dead, hanging by wires and synthetic muscle. The second guard fired. The smart bullets curved through the air, seeking the heat signature of Bruce's chest. Bruce flared his cape. It wasn't cloth. It was a memory fiber weave. The bullets impacted the heavy fabric, shredding the outer layer but losing their kinetic energy before hitting the armor underneath. Impact detected. Chest integrity 92%. Bruce closed the distance. He swept the guard's legs, not with a kick, but with a low sweep of his shin, reinforced with tungsten. The guard's reinforced femurs held, but his balance didn't. He hit the floor. Before the man could reboot his equilibrium, Bruce drove a heel onto the guard's shoulder, right where the neural interface port connected the arm to the spine. He pressed down, hard. The port shattered. Sparks showered the white floor. The guard convulsed as his nervous system was flooded with error messages. "My arm!" the guard shrieked, clutching the limp, sparking limb. "I can't feel my arm!" Batman stood over them. He looked like a gargoyle carved from a nightmare. "You won't work again," Batman said. The voice was low, terrifyingly calm. "Not for Arasaka, not for anyone. You are a liability." He stepped over the sobbing men and moved toward the security doors. The server floor, 0220 hours. The alarm was blaring now, a silent, digital alarm screaming through the subnet. Batman walked down the central corridor. He didn't run. Monsters don't run. A netrunner sat in a glass-walled booth at the end of the hall, flanked by 3 heavy solos with shotguns. The netrunner's eyes were rolled back, glowing white. He was diving. Bruce felt the intrusion immediately. It started as a pressure behind his eyes, a phantom migraine. The netrunner was trying to handshake with the suit's OS. He was looking for a port, a wireless vulnerability, a way to overheat Bruce's synapses. Intrusion attempt detected. Source, local subnet. Class, demon short circuit. "Let him in," Bruce whispered. Advisory, dangerous. Let him knock, then open the door. The netrunner grinned in his trance. He had found the signal. He pushed the demon through the breach. Bruce triggered the countermeasure. It wasn't a hack. He wasn't writing code. He was redirecting the flow. Victor, feedback loop. Route the suit's thermal exhaust output directly into the data stream. Routing. In the glass booth, the netrunner gasped. His deck didn't just crash, it smoked. The thermal sensors in his brain interpreted the raw data of Bruce's reactor heat as physical fire. The netrunner screamed, clawing at his face, ripping the interface plugs out of his head. "Ah! I'm burning! It's burning me!" He collapsed, his brain fried by a phantom fire. The 3 solos panicked. They saw their tech specialist go down without a shot fired. They raised their shotguns, Carnage heavy impact slug throwers. Batman threw a smoke pellet. The corridor filled with dense gray fog. The solos fired blindly. The slugs tore chunks out of the walls. Batman moved through the smoke. He used the thermal vision in his cowl to see their glowing heat signatures. He targeted the first solo. The man had mantis blades retracted in his forearms. Bruce grabbed the man's arm, finding the deployment mechanism housing. He squeezed. The metal buckled. When the solo tried to trigger the blades, they deployed inward, slicing through the man's own servos. The solo dropped, writhing. The second solo swung a shotgun. Bruce caught the weapon, ripped it from the man's grip, and used the stock to strike the man's knee, specifically the lateral stabilizer of his cyber leg. The leg locked up, freezing straight. The man fell, unable to bend his knee. The third solo turned to run. Batman fired the grapple. The claw wrapped around the man's ankle. Bruce yanked. The solo was dragged back into the smoke. Silence followed. Then, the sound of a heavy gauntlet striking metal. Then, nothing. The lab. Bruce breached the inner sanctum. The heavy blast door had been sealed, but Bruce had used the industrial laser cutter in his belt to fuse the locking mechanism, then applied a shaped charge to the hinges. He stepped inside. The prototype unit was there, sitting in a containment field. It was pulsing with a soft blue light. Bruce approached it. He checked the room for traps. Scanning. Motion sensors disabled. Laser grid inactive. He opened the containment unit. He didn't just take the box. He accessed the terminal next to it. He inserted a shard. "Planting the narrative," Bruce muttered. The shard contained a fabricated trail of encrypted emails. It made it look like the head of security had sold the access codes to a rival fixer in Haywood. It was a lie, but it was a lie Arasaka would want to believe. It was cheaper to blame a traitor than to admit they had been beaten by a ghost. He secured the prototype to the magnetic maglock on his lower back. Objective secured. Victor. Status? Armor integrity 65%. Left gauntlet servo damaged. Lazarus levels 9%. Heart rate 110 beats per minute. Recommend extraction. Agreed. He turned to leave. That was when the window exploded. It wasn't a sniper. It was an autocannon. The rounds tore through the reinforced glass of the skyscraper, shredding the office furniture. Bruce dove, rolling behind a heavy plasteel desk as the room disintegrated. Threat assessment, aerial vehicle, class, AV-4 tactical. Bruce peeked over the desk. Hovering outside the window, bathed in the wash of searchlights, was a massive, armored AV. The logo on the side was unmistakable. Trauma Team. Damn it, Bruce hissed. He glanced at the floor. One of the security chiefs, a man in a suit hiding under a table, was clutching a platinum card. He was bleeding from a shrapnel wound in his leg. His biomonitor had screamed for help. Trauma Team wasn't here for Batman. They were here for the client. And Batman was the threat obstructing the rescue. "Clear the sector!" a voice amplified from the AV roared. "Medical extraction in progress. Lethal force authorized." Two heavily armored paramedics dropped from the AV onto the shattered floor. They weren't doctors. They were tanks with defibrillators. They raised modified smart rifles. "Hostile identified. Engage!" They opened fire. Bruce moved. He couldn't fight them like thugs. These men were armored in neofiber weave. He rolled across the floor, dodging the smart bullets. He pulled a batarang, one of the few he had crafted. It was razor-sharp tungsten. He threw it. Not at the medics, at the AV. The blade spun through the air and struck the starboard engine intake. It wedged in the turbine fan. The engine sparked and sputtered. The AV lurched, the pilot fighting for stability. "Engine failure! Abort! Abort!" The medics hesitated, looking back at their ride. Batman surged forward. He didn't strike them. He fired his grapple at the ceiling, swinging over their heads. As he passed, he dropped a cluster of flashbangs at their feet. The medics staggered, blinded. Batman landed in the hallway. He had to go, now. But as he sprinted toward the stairwell, the building shook. A deep, resonant boom echoed from the roof. It wasn't the Trauma Team AV leaving. It was something heavier landing. Acoustic signature detected. Heavy dropship. Multiple contacts. Victor's voice dropped an octave, mimicking fear. Police band intercept. Code 1066. Cyberpsycho in progress. MaxTac deployed. Bruce stopped dead. MaxTac. The Maximum Force Tactical Division. The Psycho Squad. They were monsters hired to kill monsters. They didn't care about platinum cards. They didn't care about prototypes. They were here because the Trauma Team pilot had flagged a Class A metahuman threat. The elevator doors at the end of the hall blew outward. Out of the smoke stepped a figure. Female, 7 feet tall. Heavy chrome plating that looked like dragon scales. Mantis blades extended, humming with thermal energy. She looked at Batman. Her eyes were black voids. "Pray," she whispered. The audio pickup in Bruce's cowl caught it clearly. Behind her, 3 more officers fanned out. One with a heavy machine gun, one with a net launcher. Bruce looked at his HUD. Combat probability, 3%. Survival probability, 0%. He was injured. He was low on Lazarus. His suit was compromised. And he was staring at the apex predators of Night City. He didn't posture. He didn't speak. Batman turned and ran. He sprinted toward the shattered window where the Trauma Team AV had been. "Target fleeing!" the MaxTac leader screeched, blurring forward with Sandevistan speed. She was fast, faster than Bruce. She closed the 30-foot gap in a second. Bruce reached the edge of the broken glass. He could hear the whine of her blades behind his neck. He didn't jump out. He jumped up. He fired the grapple at the underside of the floor above, hauling himself vertically just as the mantis blades carved the air where his head had been. He swung out into the open air, dangling 80 stories above the street. The rain lashed at him. The MaxTac officer stood at the ledge, looking up. She grinned. She jumped after him.